And welcome back to the Gampel Effect. I'm Dan Katz, joined alongside by Jon Harner. This week wasn't about talent. It wasn't about rankings. It was about standard. UConn survives Georgetown in a grinder, beating the Hoyas 79-75, never trailing and improving to 24-2 and 14-1 at the Big East at the time. They raised Emeka Okafor's number 50 into the rafters and put Hasheem Thabeet into the Huskies Ring of Honor. And then Creighton walks into their building and drops 91. And afterwards, Dan Hurley didn't dodge it. He went straight at it. Welcome back to the Gampel Effect, where UConn basketball isn't just watched, it's measured. This week, it was measured. Silas Demary Jr. near triple-double against Georgetown, 1 assist shy. Solo ball crossing 1,000 points for his career. Alex Karaban becoming the winningest program in program history, winningest player, with 116 victories. Ed Cooley questions the UConn student section. It wasn't pretty, but it was tough. That was the warning because the cracks were there. And then last night at Gampel Pavilion, on a night they retire Emeka Okafor's number, they give up 91 at home and fall 91-84 to 13-12 Creighton team. Creighton ended up shooting 32 free throws, 18 in the second half where they made 17. UConn ended up missing 10 straight shots during a decisive stretch. It's not variance, it's slippage. And Dan Hurley did not sugarcoat it. Our defense has been so bad, around the 165th best defense in the country over their last 4 games. And then he adds, the defense has been a joke. He said it's been brewing. He said they've been playing with fire. Now 24-3, 14-2 in Big East. They're a half game behind St. John's, 1 back in the loss column. That's the contrast. That's the consequence. Now, as the Big East race has tightened up, seeding questions creep in, and Villanova and St. John's are next. This isn't panic, it's accountability. Because in February, you don't drift. You either respond or you slide. And let's break it down, starting with the game against Georgetown, which could have been a Valentine's Day massacre for the Huskies. Jon, UConn jumped out early on with a 41-33 lead on a night they honored Hasheem Thabeet. What did you see early on from the Huskies?
Well, it started off great. They started to play inside out, and Tarris Reed got a couple easy buckets, and then also made a couple nice kickouts for open threes. And it looked like the offense was clicking initially, and it looked like we were going to win by double digits and have a nice, comfortable game for once. But then, the second half came around and things started to change drastically.
And to your point, Braylon Mullins had a strong first half with 13 points, solo ball with 10 points. UConn did start the second half off strong. They were on an 8-2 run. They went up 14 points, 49-35. But then a story started to unveil that we've seen far too frequently since Big East play has begun. Around the 11-minute mark of the second half, Georgetown had cut that UConn lead once 14 to 6, 52-46. The game would go back and forth over the next 4-minute stretch. UConn extended their lead to 67-57. But just like the previous Georgetown game, Villanova game in second half against St. John's, UConn did not execute, and they allowed the Hoyas back into the game. A 10-point game turned into 4 with 2:32 remaining, 72-68. UConn got some stops. Silas Demary hit some free throws. They're up 77-70 with 30 seconds remaining. Then, Jon, the unthinkable happens. Instead of just allowing KJ Lewis to shoot a 3, Tarris Reed, who had an awful evening, 4 points, fouls KJ Lewis from behind the arc. He hits the 3, makes the free throw, cuts it to a 3-point lead. And then UConn, in a scene we've seen over and over again, cannot inbound the basketball and struggle to get it over the 10-second line. 0.1 left. They had called a timeout. It looked like Georgetown may get the ball back. When they go back and they review the play, there ends up being 0.1 left. And
Unbelievable.
UConn goes to inbound the ball, and unthinkably, they turn it over. Luckily, Danny ends up fouling because there were 14 seconds remaining. Georgetown hits the first. They intentionally miss the second. Karaban grabs the rebound. He hits the 2 free throws, and UConn holds on 79-75. They had 20 assists, 10 turnovers. Silas Demary Jr., 15 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists. Solo strong game. Alex really playing on one leg at 18 points, 13 coming in the second half. He had that injury in Butler, which we'll get into later with how he performed last night against Creighton. Karaban gets to that 116 win plateau. But Georgetown, they got to the line 23 times. They shot 12 of 28 from behind the arc, 43%. And on the defense, Hurley commended the defense in the first half. They did a better job protecting the paint. But when Silas and Tarris go to the bench, it's like UConn forgets how to defend at all. And that's not something we saw at the beginning of the season. What do you attribute that to? And who's the main culprit?
I don't think there is a main culprit on this team, and that's the problem. I think the guards in general are just not as good as they were in the previous years as guarding the ball. Even coming off the bench in the previous years, we had a guy like Diarra coming in, and he was known as a defensive stopper, a genius. We don't have that with Smith right now. Beginning of the season, he was playing much better defensively. Off the bench lately, he looks lost out there. And then Ball is completely lost out there at this moment in time. He was never a great defender, but he was serviceable. Now I don't even think he is serviceable. I think his head is completely gone and needs to reset some way, somehow for these last 10 games. And then Mullins, I will say he is a pretty good defender, keeps this guy in front of him. But what hurts him is he doesn't have that extra 20 pounds of muscle to keep the guys out of the lane. And with all that said, that leads to easy buckets, leads to the guards for easy penetration. And once you get that easy penetration, you get everybody else rotating, which leads to easy buckets. So I think that's the main reason, or one of the big reasons right now why our defense is not playing up to the level where it was at the beginning of the season.
And a guy, just kind of transitioning to someone who gives his all. And not saying that Solo is not giving effort, not saying that Braylon's not giving effort.
Yeah.
They're out there, they're trying. But Alex Karaban, Danny Oe's willing to give him his flowers. He said, with the leg thing, he almost didn't play in the Georgetown game. And he compared him to freaking Kirk Gibson. And if AK doesn't play, he thinks they don't win that game, and he's not wrong. And I know Ryba came up big, especially with Reed being in foul trouble. And Reed's a guy, he comes in, Big East all first team preseason, potential All-American. The numbers are there, but the consistency isn't. What are you seeing from Tarris recently?
Recently, I think a lot has to do with the fact he doesn't get the ball consistently. For whatever reason, we make an effort throughout the games to kind of focus on him for maybe a 4-minute stretch here and there, and I think that's really helps him get involved in the game and become part of the game and get a better flow for the game. I think in the beginning of the season, we were only averaging like maybe 23, 24 3-pointers in the course of the season. Beginning of the season, now we're up to almost 29 in the last 6 games. So we're looking for the outside shot more than we're actually looking to hit the big man down low. I think that's part of the reason because Mullins, Ball, Silas, they all have a green light. Even Alex Hurley says, if you're open, shoot it. Sometimes those shots, 10 seconds into the shot clock are not the shots that we want. And I think we have to do a better job just to give him a paint touch. He doesn't have to, doesn't have to be it's Terrence, take your man to the hole. No, just get at the paint touch. Lately, he's been really good at, kicking the ball out and finding the open man, which creates even better shots for 3-point shooters, open looks. So I think The main reason is we're just not getting him involved in the flow of the offense as much as we did at the beginning of the season.
And what's interesting, is you look back at the two championship teams, the 22-23, 23-24. Sanogo and Klingon were focal points of the offense,
Right.
even with all that firepower from behind the arc. And Tarris has proven no one's going to stop him down low. You get him the ball in the paint, and when they do get it to him, it's not that he isn't a willing passer, and I think that's the area of his game that he's improved immensely. And he's just one of those guys, to your point, if he's not getting touches, he's kind of out on an island. But speaking of being out on an island, what's going on with Husky faithful, especially the student section? It's not something I'm used to seeing, and it's not something Dan Hurley expects. At his press conference, what happens is everyone's aware. Ed Cooley walks by him and he's like, what's the deal with your student section? Why are all those empty seats? And Hurley said, I think the section behind our basket was empty. It should be a madhouse when we play here. And Hurley goes on to say, we've given our fans 2 national championships over the last 3 years. We're 24-2. We're 14-1. They've been ranked in the top 5 all year. There shouldn't be criticisms of our crowds. Says, with the UConn jersey on the road, you go to Xavier, you go to Creighton, and Stores South, he said, is no more. As it was really a brutal environment, but you haven't been hearing the crowd, and it's something. I don't know if the UConn fan base is feeling spoiled. I know 6 national championships in 25 years, and I get it. I'll never tell anyone how to spend their money.
Right.
And the prices are keeping some fans out, but at the same point, like for the student section to not be there when they're getting free tickets,
that's the whole thing. They're not paying $100 to get into the game. The student section on a $2 beer night too, right? Last night, and it was Creighton, and it was kind of at times you're like, you should be cheering every play, no matter what. And I honestly don't know what it is. Like, do you think playing at Gampel and playing down at the XL or Center, the split, do you think that has anything to do with it?
I mean, I know the university does a good job of busing students down from Stores.
Yeah.
So transportation really shouldn't be an issue. The UConn student body, it's one of the toughest public universities to get into in the country. So I don't know if you students who maybe have higher GPAs and higher standardized test scores aren't as rabid fans, but the correlation, it doesn't make sense because the basketball teams really help it in terms of applications. Right. There's always a spike in applications after the team wins the national championship. So I'm not really certain what's going on, but as Danny says, you don't come to watch the game. It's not an effing social event. We need our fans to come to the game and be as loud as effing possible. And it needs to be a madhouse. And, to their credit, last night, Gampel felt like Gampel Pavilion. And I could recall, we're there 01 to 05. I was fortunate enough to do the games in 05, 06. Games against teams like Miami, you couldn't hear yourself in terms of the atmosphere. But they survived, but survival isn't the bar in Stores. And then came Creighton, and this has been brewing for a while. The message was received from the home crowd. Gampel was popping even before tip-off. Back and forth early on as Creighton went up 20-15. UConn went on a mini 5-0 run, a Jaden Ross 3. We'll hear more from him later. Schwartz 2 gave the Blue Jays a 22-20 lead under the 12th timeout. Tarris free throw gave UConn a 29-28 lead, 7 minutes to go in the first half. Creighton proceeds to go on a 6-1 run. They take a 35-30 lead. And if it wasn't for Braylon Mullins over the last 4 minutes, UConn would have been down going in at the half. But they were tied at 45. But some of the things that I saw right off the bat, they were losing the one-on-one battles. It wasn't even anything McDermott was running, and he's definitely one of the better tactical coaches in the league. But they were just getting blown off the ball. Ball was getting blown off the dribble. Picked up 3 fouls in the first half. Braylon Mullins couldn't keep his man in front of him. Silas, the high screen, was giving him difficulties. And we don't have that guy in the back of Dama and King Klingon to erase some of these mistakes. And, even Samson Johnson last year. So that was worrisome. Solo Ball starts the second half on the bench, and he probably should have remained there for the rest of the game. Jaden Ross did an amazing job defensively. UConn jumped out to a 57-51 lead after being tied at 45. Then Solo comes back in about 13 minutes remaining and immediately hoists the shot from about 29, 30 feet.
Contested.
He had no flow. And
No.
and then the next possession shoots a 3. And guess what? Creighton capitalized. They went on a 7-0 run. They end up taking a 58-57 lead. And instead of cruising down the stretch of the game, UConn had a white knuckler on their hands. Game ultimately was tied at 63. Mullins was doing everything to keep the Huskies in the game. Then they missed 10 shots in a row.
Yeah.
And you look up and Creighton's up 73-65. Couple of late threes by the Blue Jays iced the game. UConn dropped this one 91-84. They fell to 24-3 overall, 14-2 in the Big East, potentially putting their Big East regular season dreams at jeopardy and a potential 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. But we'll get to that later. UConn's been playing with fire all January and all February, besides the 2 games where they really handled the game against Xavier at home and the game on the road against Creighton. Now, I know in the game at Creighton, Dix, his mother had passed away. Right. He was having a lot of struggles around that. You definitely got to give that kid empathy and understand. But this is the same team UConn took to the woodshed and beat by 27 points. What's been going on over these past 4 games? Is it really just bad individual defense? Is it not the scheme? Danny says in the post game, it's not the coaching. It's not the guys I'm putting in. They're not taking advantage of the opportunities. But I think what he said, what was also interesting is there's a reason Jaden Ross played 27 minutes last night. Yeah, and it wasn't only for the foul trouble, he said.
No, he played well last night. Played with a good intensity. He was composed for once, I felt like. Played great on the ball defense. I think he got hosed on a couple calls. I thought he had 2 clean blocks and he got called for the fouls. But yeah, no, he earned those minutes last night, and he gave Danny something to think about now in terms of what to do with ball.
Well, and so that's the question I have for you. UConn is last in the Big East in bench points per game.
Right.
They are really struggling with one-on-one defense. Between Braylon and Silas and Alex and Tarris, scoring punch really isn't an issue for them. Mm-hmm. Is something he considers having Solo come off the bench?
I think it's a possibility. I think I had this conversation with you off the air and said Ball should have been coming off the bench maybe 5 games ago because he was shooting so poorly. Maybe that would be the confidence booster that he needed. At this point, I'm willing to try anything with Solo just to see what I think it might actually help the rotation too. Going around, the first time out or the first substitution pattern when you can put him in and take out Ross, and then you still have a solid lineup out there. I think that's where we're getting a little hurt too when he does like the mass hockey line substitutions, when you bring in three players instead of kind of staggering it out a little bit. So I think from that regard, yeah, I think you got to try this at this point because it's not working with Solo at the moment, not this year at least.
And I know it's one game, but Jaden Ross guarded. He rotated. He didn't blow assignments.
Right.
He gave effort. And, as Danny's saying, that the bench players got to give him a reason to keep him on the floor. And what's crazy is going into the season, everyone talked about how deep this UConn team is.
Right.
And Jalen Stewart coming back, and Jaden Ross, and Malachi Smith, and Eric Ryba. And, a guy who played pretty well during the non-conference, Chroma. Why is he not get any?
Yeah. Why is he not getting any minutes?
And again, is he a Big East player? Probably not. But there's no reason he can't spell Karaban for 3 minutes,
Right. Especially last night when, it looked like he couldn't move out there. I think towards the end of the game, there was a corner three by Creighton, and he's running out with his two hands up. But, he was still 5 feet away by the time he, shot the ball and really didn't challenge him at all. And that point, it's like, is he actually helping us at this point, or it's a hindrance to have him out there? And last night it looked like it was a hindrance. So why not bring in a guy to give you some defensive effort, especially if you still have Mullins and Silas and Reed out there for the scoring punch?
Yeah, no, and I think Danny referenced him as a cargo ship in the post game, and listen, Alex is trying to grit it out, and Alex personifies winning, and he's everything that you want in a Husky uniform. But he's a 22, 23-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And again, in a game against a team like Creighton, you probably could have sat Alex and won the game.
That's what would be my next question to you. Did we need him to play last night to either further risk injury or potentially even to win this game?
Right.
Knowing that and knowing how he looked, I would have just said start Stewart.
Yeah.
And then go from there. And if Alex can give you maybe 10 minutes off the bench, so be it. But let's aim for that.
And what's scary is that right now they have Villanova coming up.
Right.
They have on the road, and Villanova has been the surprise of the Big East this year. And Kevin Willard, you got to give him all his flowers for the job that he's done with the Wildcats. And you got St. John's and Hartford. And UConn 20, whatever they were, going into the St. John's game with the one loss. You thought they had a 1 seed locked up. They could fall to number 3 in the Big East.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with them. And, defense collapsed, the offense dried up, and that's how you're going to lose at home.
Yeah.
What are the Big East implications here? So right now, UConn is 14-2. They have 4 games remaining in the regular season. They have a game on the road at Villanova. They have a game at home against St. John's, a game at home at Gampel. So they're playing St. John's and Hartford. They're playing Gampel against Seton Hall. And then they go on the road to Marquette, who's, again, another team that has underperformed and underachieved this year. But they're starting to play better basketball. They only lost to St. John's by 6 last night.
Yeah, that was a good game.
So there's a possibility that UConn could go 2-2.
No, easily.
Over these next. And if they do that, they end up at 26-5. Now you're looking at a 2-3 seed instead of a 1 seed.
Right.
Now, and again, I think that the last 10 games should factor into decisions.
Absolutely.
But the way that they're using metrics, a win in November counts the same as a win in March. And I don't know, and I've dug deeper into Duke's schedule. I got to give them a little more credit than I've been giving them.
Yeah, they played a decent schedule, non-conference.
Yeah, and they play Michigan on Saturday, so we'll really see how good Duke
see
is.
how they are. Yeah.
But when I see Kansas and when I see Illinois has 7 quad 1 wins. Who is Illinois beaten this year?
Yeah.
Great, the Big Ten. Oh, Purdue's had a good year. Oh, Nebraska. You're telling me that that's better than going to Fog Allen and beating Kansas or beating Florida? I almost fell out of my seat. I was listening to the Field of 68 this morning, and they were talking about, if Florida wins the SEC, they should be considered for a 1 seed. I'm like, Florida may be playing really good basketball right now, and Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland, and they got the best front court in college basketball, and no one can argue with that. But your resume is what your resume is, and they have 5 losses. And guess what? One of those was to UConn. So there's no reason why a team like Florida should even be discussed. Now, is Florida a team that I want to see in the NCAA tournament? Absolutely not.
No.
But at the same point, UConn, and we're talking about Emeka Okafor, who goes in the rafters, were they a 1 seed that year? No. They were a 2.
Yeah, so, I had to look back on that the other day when we were talking about that. And I totally forgot that they weren't the 1 seed.
Yeah,
we were 2 out west with Stanford being the 1 seed, who lost early in that around the 32, I think.
Yeah, and well, they did because they lost to Alabama.
Yeah,
in the second round. Yep. And if you remember, that was the year that St. Joe's was undefeated, like another team, Miami of Ohio, with Jameer Nelson and Delonte West.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Miami of Ohio has that type of talent on their team.
They don't have 2 NBA players, 10-year players on their team, I don't think. Yeah.
But like I always laugh when they start. And again, I got to give Joey Brackets his credit. He always gets at least 67 out of the 68 teams. And I think it's become very formulaic. But I think you can't take away from that head-to-head, much like you look at college football this past year with Miami and Notre Dame. I thought it was ridiculous that Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Miami for that long. And then they're like, I guess now head-to-head matters type of thing.
Yeah.
But no, UConn has put themselves in a position, which I can't believe I'm even talking about this right now, after starting the year as strong as they did, where a 1 seed's not guaranteed, a 2 seed may not even be guaranteed at this point. Now, what I will say is, for all those of you who are concerned and worried, the last 2 times UConn has won the national championship, their last loss of the season was to Creighton.
Oh, okay.
So
are you predicting something right now? You willing to go that far?
Not from what I've seen, but the talent is there. The talent is there. I think they've peaked in December. They really haven't played great basketball. I think they've been bailed out by playing in the Big East this year. I think if they played in the Big Ten, if they played in the Big 12, I don't think they'd be 24-3. Now, that's not to say they're not one of the top 5 teams in the country, because I still believe that they are, but they got to make some changes. And I look at this as an opportunity. I look at Villanova on Saturday and St. John's on Wednesday as an opportunity to really show the rest of the country who they are. And the Nova game's going to be tough. It's really, as we were talking about last week, the way Caden Lewis has been playing, Willard's system really, just like Jay did at Nova, he likes to slow you down.
Yeah.
And with less possessions, you're going to have tighter games. And it's how UConn executes. Now, what I will say is that Tarris Reed has a major mismatch down low against Nova. And I'd like to see them, like you were saying earlier, get back to that.
Exactly. They got to find a way to get him the ball. If healthy too, Alex, I'd like to see him get in the post a little more too. Put some pressure on these teams on Nova. Like, get them in foul trouble. Like, I don't think they really have a deep bench, and they definitely don't have any depth, in my opinion, at the forward or the center position. So if we put some pressure on them, get those guys in some foul trouble early, we could dictate the pace of play and hopefully walk out of Philadelphia with a victory.
Yeah. So, we're looking, is this correction point or a crack? So Villanova, last time Villanova took the Huskies to overtime. Lindsay had a strong game for them. Askew, the former McDonald's All-American, who's played at like 5 universities now, I think, has been a nice piece for Kevin Willard and that Wildcat team. They can shoot the 3, but UConn's, they really got to defend. They really got to work on executing. And, my question to you, it's the same offense they were running in 23-24.
Right.
I know UConn had Klingon down low. And I know anytime he touched the ball, he would get fouled.
Right.
In 22-23, it was similar with Dama. And I know every time Tristan took the ball to the rim, he would get fouled. He would take some of the most awkward falls I've ever seen. But, but I don't, what I don't get, and I know we shoot a lot more threes than we shot back then, but I don't understand why we don't get other teams in foul trouble. It's not like the components aren't there. Like Silas Demary is a freaking rock.
Well, yeah. Well, and look at that stretch to begin the second half last night.
Yep.
He, gets a steal and takes it to the hole and gets fouled. I think the play before he attacks the hole and gets to the line again. Like, those plays we're not doing it. I don't know why. And I don't know why we're not attacking the rim off the dribble, like on our sets. I think, and that's the big point of why we're not getting these foul calls or any foul calls, because we're not drawing the contact. We're pulling up from 15 feet, doing a little floater, which is fine with me, but sometimes we do have that extra one dribble where you can get to the lane and can draw that foul, and we're not taking it. We're settling for those little floaters, I feel like, and I think that's also another reason why we're not getting any foul calls.
No, and to your point, I mean, again, early in the non-conference, Solo taking the ball to the rim.
Yeah, that's gone. When was the last time you saw that?
And listen, I like when he comes off the curl. I don't mind the 8 to 10 foot floater that he takes.
Yeah,
because I think Braylon is the best shooter on the Husky team. I think Solo is probably the best scorer. And I know it's been tough with him with the wrist, but I don't know what Danny's going to do with him. And, I give Solo credit because he very easily could have left the Huskies after his freshman year.
Right.
I was actually kind of surprised he came back, and he had an amazing season last year. He really did. And there's been moments this year where he's been spectacular, but all he really gives them is scoring. I feel like he can be a better rebounder than he is. I agree. I think it's crazy. He's year 3. The defensive concepts he's struggling with.
Right.
So I think from an athletic standpoint, I think if UConn can jump on Villanova early, I think that's going to be helpful. How are you feeling about the St. John's game? Because I really think the Villanova game is going to impact how they perform in the St. John's game.
100%. If we play well and we get the victory, then I think going into that, then I think there's should be no pressure on the team to perform well. But if we struggle and if we do happen to lose, then I feel like this team is just going to view that St. John's game almost as a must win. And then I think I hate to say the wheels fall off, but like I don't see us performing well against St. John's. St. John's is all going to come down to is how are we going to handle the pressure from the inbounding to their physicality, and then see how the refs call the game. If the refs are going to let a little hand checking go by and not call everything, then it might be beneficial to St. John's. But we got to be ready for that. And every time we play St. John's recently, I don't think we are ever truly ready for that or prepared for that mentally for whatever reason. And I don't know. And I'm sure Danny tells them constantly, this is how Rick's team's going to play. So be ready for this. But it doesn't translate out on the court, it seems like.
So I think as we're almost wrapping up, do you think Ross potentially starts against Nova? I mean, I'm interested with Alex because I don't know with his health right now. I don't even know if he plays the Nova game.
So if Alex is fine and can play, then I think Ross starts. But if Alex can't go, then we're looking at Stewart. And then I don't think you start Ross at that point. But so to answer your question, who knows?
Yeah.
It's a game time decision. But I would, if we're playing with a full deck, then I would say start Ross. And let's see how Ball responds coming off the bench.
Well, again, thank you, John. And here's what we know. Georgetown was a warning. Creighton was the consequence. You can survive on execution. You cannot survive without defense. Dan Hurley called it what it is. So bad. A joke. Playing with fire. And when you raise a defensive legend into the rafters and give up 91 at home, that's not coincidence. That's contrast. The Big East race has just tightened. The margin is just thin. The noise got louder. But this program doesn't measure itself by February frustration. It measures itself by response, by banners, by habits, by whether the standard bends or holds. Villanova is next. St. John's is looming. And now we find out what this team really is. For Jon Harner, I'm Dan Katz. This is the Gampel Effect, Stores basketball capital of the world. Talk to you.